Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here, gonna do another gun review today. This one's gonna be a review of my new, used, Smith and Wesson Model 10-8. Now the Smith and Wesson Model 10 and all the previous models like the hand ejector model and the M&P and whatever other names they had for this basic design has been made since the late 1890s. I don't know exactly when, like 1898 or 1899 or somewhere around there. And this basic design of a Smith and Wesson revolver has been made ever since. But the Smith and Wesson Model 10 and variants thereof was a very popular double action revolver in military and police, hence the name M&P. So it's like the original M&P. Now when you think of M&P, you think of M&P 9, M&P 40, things like that. But this was the original M&P, and so it's basically it's a K-frame, which is a full-size revolver, or what I would consider to be a full-size revolver, and it's a 6-shot 38 special. It is not a 357 Magnum like the Model 19 and Model 65 and other K-frame 357 Magnums. This is a 38 special. Not sure if it can take 38 special plus Ps. It might be able to. I'm not sure. I would have to look that up and see for myself. But it is a double action revolver, so you can shoot it in single action with pulling the hammer back, and you can obviously pull the trigger and actuate the hammer for double action. Since it's a Smith and Wesson, it's a push forward cylinder release, just like my Taurus Model 85. Has a 4-inch barrel, and this is a, I don't know if you would consider it a bull barrel, but it's a heavier barrel than some of the earlier models. And I opted for this model over the 10-5, which was also available from the same seller, because this one has a much thicker barrel. The 10-5 had a much thinner barrel. Has basic trench and post style sights, so nothing fancy there. The Model 15, I believe, was the adjustable sight model of, the adjustable sight version of this model. This one came with Pachmayr grips, and I'm generally not a big fan of these rubber grips, but the Pachmayrs I do kind of like. They do feel good compared to the Hogues, and they look better, in my opinion. So I got this gun off a gun broker for $360, which I think was a pretty awesome deal, if I do say so myself, because these are generally like $400 plus, and it's actually in pretty good condition. It has a little wear here, it has a little bit of rust down here that I need to get off, but other than that, I mean, it's pretty good revolver. It has a nice bluing, aside from the cylinder scratch there. Everything seems to work okay. The only thing that I want to address is with a single action, you pull the hammer back. I noticed this when I first got it. It has a very light single action pull, and messing around with it at first, I noticed that it's so light. The trigger pull itself is so light compared to the return spring of the trigger that you sometimes, like, you can barely touch the trigger, and the trigger, when the hammer falls, it immediately pulls the trigger forward, and it's something that you don't expect. And it's because it's such a light trigger pull compared to the actual spring tension of the return spring of the trigger. And it doesn't do it all the time. Like there, it didn't do it. But sometimes you can, if I can get it to do it, sometimes when you touch that trigger, you can, see, now I can't get it to do it. If you're not expecting it to pull right away, see, like that, you can trip the sear on this thing by just barely touching that trigger. and that trigger will jump forward. And in doing that, you might not actually be firing the gun, because since this is a rebounding hammer, instead of using a transfer bar, they use a rebounding hammer. And as soon as that trigger jumps forward, that hammer's not going to be able to go all the way in, and the firing pin's not going to hit the primer, so your gun's not going to go off. It's not a huge deal, but this is the first revolver that I've ever seen that happen on. Now, generally, this is probably not going to be an issue, because, when you have your good stance, you're generally going to be, oh, see, it did it again. But generally, you're going to be squeezing quite a bit. But again, that's a really light trigger pull, and sometimes you're not expecting it to go off, and it just jumps forward. But not all the time. I just thought that was something that should be addressed in this review, because I don't think that's something that, see, there it goes. So I don't think that's something that's typical of Smith and Wesson. Let me know what you guys think, because I thought that was kind of weird. Maybe I'm just overreacting and being a pansy or whatever. But I just think it's kind of weird that if you just barely touch the trigger and it trips the sear and your trigger jumps forward on you unexpectedly. That's just me. I might have to take it to the range and see what happens. But yeah, so anyway, that's my review of my Smith and Wesson Model 10-8. Subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm Redneck Mini 14, and until next time, be safe.